how we navigate this transition to build a truly successful, inclusive, equitable, multi-ethnic society will have enormous implications, not just for the Houston future, but for the American future. This is where the American future is being worked out.
Today's episode is sponsored by HEB Curbside and Delivery. When life throws you a loop, HEB Curbside and Delivery is here to help. We shop how you shop, so you get exactly what you want. Order today at HEB.com. HEB Curbside and Delivery. It's never been easier to shop HEB. Hello, our Voices Matter audience. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm so excited to have our guest. Dr. Stephen Kleinberg is a very, very well-known researcher, sociologist, demographer, author, and director of the Kinder Institute on Urban Research. Steve, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
I'm the founding director. We have a new
director. Not just the director, the founding director.
And I can be founding director forever, right?
Yes, the founding director. Okay. So tell our audience what the Kinder Institute is. What is your focus?
Well, my focus is this survey that we've been conducting now for 38 years. When we began back in 1982, Houston was booming, city world famous for having imposed the least amount of controls on development of any city in the Western world. Who cares if it's ugly? So what if it smells? Come on down. Booming city with growing problems that it wasn't really addressing. So we did a one-time survey to measure how are people balancing this growth with concerns about traffic, pollution, crime. One-time survey, never occurred to us to do it again. 2 months later, the oil boom collapsed. Houston went into major recession, and we said, my gosh, we better do this survey again. And for 38 years, tracking the remarkable changes of the city. And then finally, we're getting this book done. So.
Yes, and so this book.
It's only been 38 years I've been working on this book.
It's only been 38 years, and you're about to finally give birth to it and bring it out into the world. And it's called Prophetic City. I love the title, Prophetic City.
And Houston on the cusp of a changing America.
Okay, and so you are famous for having said many times that Houston is the most diverse city in the country. Explain why you say that and what the rest of the country and the world really can learn from the experiment that is happening here,
right.
If you will.
Well, that's the clearest evidence of the prophetic city. Houston is where all of America is going to be in about 25 years. This was a biracial southern city dominated and controlled in an automatic, taken for granted way by white men throughout all of its history. Suddenly, with the collapse of the oil boom, the Anglo population that had been pouring into the city stopped growing, and all the growth of Houston, the most rapidly growing city in America, has been the influx of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. And this biracial southern city has become the single most ethnically diverse city in the country. How do you measure ethnic diversity? 2 ways. One is what's the percentage of Anglos? Fewer Anglos, more diverse. Better way is what's called the entropy index. How close does the population come to 1/4 Asian, 1/4 Latino, 1/4 African American, 1/4 Anglo? And by that measure of the equal division among the communities, Houston just barely beats out New York as the most ethnically diverse. The other great diversities, Los Angeles has too small a percentage of African Americans, Chicago has too many Anglos, Miami has too few Asians. Houston is where the 4 communities meet in greater balance, greater equality, all of us minorities.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Okay.
As you have done this study over the past 38 years, what have you witnessed in terms of how these different communities interact with each other and get along with each other or not? What's been the progression?
I mean, this is a big change, right? It's especially a big change for older Anglos. So we have a whole series of measures. The beauty of the surveys is that we ask identical questions, asking exactly the same wording, the same position in the questionnaire.
Each year?
Each year. Well, alternating years often to track changes.
But I mean each survey, basically.
Each survey replicates questions that have been asked in previous.
Okay.
So we can then ask, have people changed their minds or are they answering the question the same way as they did before? There's a margin of error, plus or minus 3%. A change of 7 percentage points or more from one year to the next tells you this could not have happened by chance. This tells you people are seeing the world differently. And we've been watching increasing embrace of diversity over these years as people have gotten more used to it. But above all, the key predictor among Anglos of comfort with diversity and support for immigration is age. younger Anglos are coming into the world where they take for granted this diversity. We are falling in love with each other, marrying, making multiracial babies. We older Anglos are struggling to accept what younger Anglos take for granted.
And so would you say that that is at the root of what we're seeing in terms of the divisions in our country today?
So the divisions, a lot of the divisions are not among individual Americans. It's a regime. One of the striking findings in our surveys is the disjuncture between public opinion, which is what we're measuring. We ask people in the privacy of their homes, how do you see the world? And politically effective opinion. Who controls the political apparatus? Who redistricts the districts to make sure that one party gets a preference over another? Who votes in these elections? Who has the money to control the political decision making? And so the public views of the individual Americans is much more progressive, much more accepting of this diversity, much more concerned about poverty, much more ready to make.
So if you're saying that the public is more accepting of the changes that are happening, but it's really the political apparatus, the systems that are in place,
flawed democracy,
and the people who are leading the political piece of the equation are the ones who are fighting it.
Right.
Okay, so what in your survey gives us hope that we're going to get past this and that we can find a way to bring get rid of the divisions to the degree that we can, considering, of course, that we're all humans?
Well, the polarization is serious and real, and it's you can see that in the Congress, how difficult it is for people to talk across and it's become a much more us versus them. So that's a hard thing to work through. But the reason for hope is watching the general American public changing their minds, increasingly recognizing. One of the questions you asked over the years is, should government take action to reduce income differences between rich and poor in America? Or a question that said, do you think most people receiving welfare are really in need of help, or are they taking advantage of the system? The sort of traditional American belief that this is the land of opportunity, anyone can make it, and if they're not making it, they got no one to blame but themselves. That has changed. And people are much more likely today to say, people are not taking advantage of the system. They really need help. And we asked the question that said, which of these statements comes closest to your feelings about the public schools? The schools the schools have enough money if it was used wisely to provide a quality education, or the schools will need significantly more money to provide a quality education if it was used wisely. Right? We all believe that. That's all the money we need to spend. We're not using it the right way. More and more people now say the schools will need significantly more money. That recognition that that we're in a different world now, we need to address these issues in new ways, has happened in the general public, hasn't yet gotten translated into public action.
Exactly. And so maybe now some of the younger people who are entering the political arena for the first time are taking these views with them. And so we're really in a major transition right now.
Another basis for hope.
Basis for hope.
Yeah, the big transition, just to remind us, is the aging of Anglos. The 76 million babies born in that incredible period after World War II, when the rising tide did indeed lift all boats. The average American man doubled his income in real terms between 1950 and 1970, and we celebrated the stay-at-home housewife mother in suburbia. Average American woman gave birth to 3.6 children, and the baby boom was launched upon the land. The leading edge of those 76 million is turning 74 this year. So the aging of Anglos, and by 2030, the youngest of those 76 million will have turned 65, heading off into the proverbial sunset, being replaced by a very different generation of Americans. It's an epic transformation, and Houston is at the forefront of what's happening across the country.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the fact that there are a lot of people in this community that live separately, okay? So, yes, we're diverse, but we're also segregated.
Right.
In
this is one of the most segregated cities in America.
Right. So what is that? How right. It's so interesting. We're the most diverse, and yet we're also one of the most segregated. Right. So how does your book address that, Prophetic City?
So that's what the book is capturing, is a city in the midst of this remarkable transformation.
Yeah.
That is a transformation that all of America is undergoing, nowhere more clearly seen than Houston. But it's a transition, and we come into the world, as you're saying, with baggage from our past and our history. And that's why younger people are much more, what's the big deal here? This is what I love about America.
Yeah.
And I keep telling you, got to be gentle with us old Anglos. This is a big change. But this was a deeply racist, biracial city, black and white, deep part of Jim Crow land.
Yeah, as wonderful as this place is, and I love living here, and I really don't envision living anywhere else. Having grown up even in Chicago, I love this city and I love the diversity, but we have our problems too.
Right.
So what's the headline, would you say, from your book, without giving too much away, and it hasn't come out yet?
There's several headlines.
Yeah, so what are the top 2 or 3 headlines?
Well, just to finish this thought though, that you're right. I mean, there's still we're segregated much more by income than we are by ethnicity. And the real challenge for the future of America is not so much an ethnic divide. You can see that, and we're falling in love with each other, marrying, making multiracial. 28% of all married Latinos in Houston are married to non-Latinos. Of all the marriages involving an Asian in the last 3 years, 1/3 involved a non-Asian. There's been an 800% increase in black-white marriages between 1990 and 2010.
Wow.
Still the least frequent, but growing very. So it's not an ethnic divide; it's a class divide, and it's happening in all the communities, and that's the big challenge. And it's a class divide predicated above all else on access to quality education. Mm-hmm. The good blue-collar jobs have disappeared. In the 70s, you could drop out of high school with a strong right arm, become a rustabout on the oil fields, or join a union, and the big employers was Hughes Tool Company, Cameron Iron Works. Those jobs have disappeared. 65% of all the jobs that exist in America now require education beyond high school. And Houston and Texas are at the bottom in their spending on education. Partly because you didn't need education to make money in Texas. The big Texas fortunes were made from land, exploiting all the things you could do on the land: cotton, timber, cattle, sugar, oil. We are in fundamental transition from a world where the source of wealth was natural resources to a world where the source of wealth is knowledge, human resources, skills. And that's the only way to improve the lot of the poor in the American economy of the 21st century, is to invest in their skills. So education from birth to college, from cradle to career, is now the central question for the American and the Houston future.
Well, and we've certainly had this conversation many times, just talking about the importance of the workforce component that you're talking about. And we can have a whole another show just about that. Give me the 2 headlines, and then I want to go a little bit more into your backstory and why this is so passionate, and why you've made this your life's work. But what are the 2 headlines from the book?
So I guess the 2 headlines are, number one, Houston is in the midst of the 3 fundamental changes that have occurred in America that have transformed the 21st century. Number one, a new economy where education has become critical, a demographic revolution, and the recognition that if Houston's going to make it, it has to become a destination of choice, a place where the best and the brightest people in America working at the cutting edge of knowledge will say, I want to live in Houston, Texas. And so you can see a whole bunch of different efforts to make Houston a much more attractive and interesting place, and it's making real progress. But it's those 3 challenges that are happening across all of America that are particularly clear in Houston. And then this ability to ask over these 38 years in a systematic way, how are people responding to these challenges? How are they seeing the world? And again, what we were just talking about earlier, kind of a mixed sense of both optimism, but real challenge to be able to make it to make it happen. But a sense that in a democracy in America, ultimately the public attitudes will out. Right, but it takes a long time, and people in power have a hard time giving it up.
I want to take a moment to welcome our newest sponsor, BMW of West Houston. Full disclosure, I'm a customer and have been for the last several years. I switched from another brand, which shall remain nameless, and I've never looked back. From the sedans to the SUVs, BMW of West Houston will put you in the ultimate driving machine of your dreams. The X5 and the X7, they're both on my wish list for when this podcast hits 1 million listeners. So please share away, share away. A girl can dream. Check out this month's deals at bmwwest.com. So tell me where this passion comes from. How did you end up making this topic your life's work?
Well, I get unfairly credited with having planned to do this. Right?
You just kind of fell into it.
I was teaching. I was a young professor teaching a research methods class to sociology majors. Friend of mine, Rosie Zamora-Cope. Do you know Rosie?
No, I don't.
Dick Jaffe, who started back in 1981 with a new survey organization, called Telesurveys of Texas, and we started talking together, and they were looking for new opportunities to get their name known, and I was teaching this course. I was going to do a survey of freshmen and seniors at Rice and see how they've changed over time. And then we thought, here's this booming city. Let's do a chance to study this Houston boom with no thought that it was not our fault. All of a sudden, we did the survey in May of 1982. Price of oil that had gone from $3.20 to $38, and 80% of the jobs in Houston were tied into the price of oil. This was a one-company town riding the oil boom. We were building and borrowing on the basis of $50 oil, and suddenly there was an oil glut and a worldwide recession, and the price of oil fell down to $28. And by the end of 1983, 100,000 jobs were lost in this booming city that had known nothing but economic boom from its beginnings until that fateful date of May 1982, when the world that Houston inhabited changed forever. Total collapse of the economy and then a recovery into this very different world. So we just said, well, I guess we should do the survey again with a new class the next year.
And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Enormously supportive, and then the public became more and more interested in what was happening, and so it just happened, and it turned out to be maybe the most interesting city. And the other thing that's so interesting is that outside of Houston, no one knows much about Houston.
This is true. This is true.
I tell you, you cross the country from New York, you run into Dallas.
I know.
You got to make a sharp left-hand turn and go down.
When anybody from other parts of the country think about Texas, it's always Dallas, and they don't usually,
240 miles south to get to
Right. So I'm glad you're putting Houston a little bit more on the map.
That's right. Well, Simon and Schuster, to their credit, when we made our proposal, said two things. They said, we've been waiting for a book about Houston. The last serious comprehensive analysis of the city was published in 1991 by two great professors at the University of Houston. The book was called Pro-Growth Governance. So it's been 30 years. And then they say, can you write a book about Houston that people in New York will want to read? And I said, I think we can. I think that this is a book, but it's a book about America. And the fact that the big way, as I mentioned earlier, that we're the prophetic city, is that the census has a projection for what America will look like in 2050. And it's the picture they have of Houston today. So we are where all of America is going to be in the next 25 years. All of America will look like Houston looks today. So we're there first. How we navigate this transition to build a truly successful, inclusive, equitable, multi-ethnic society will have enormous implications, not just for the Houston future, but for the American future. Right. This is where the American future is being worked out, for better or worse. So it's an interesting moment for Houston, I think.
So I know you've got children and grandchildren. You grew up on the East Coast?
Grew up home was somewhere between Philadelphia and Boston.
Okay,
and I assumed that's where I was going to be.
Yeah. What were your early years like growing up?
So I'm the youngest of three children and the son of a very famous professor of psychology at Columbia University. So I'm a second generation academic.
Okay.
And grew up in Scarsdale, New York, which is a sort of very nice suburb in Westchester County.
You went to Haverford College,
went to this wonderful liberal arts college in Philadelphia, and then Harvard, and then taught at Princeton, and then got this great offer from Rice, and had never been off the East Coast. And we thought, well, maybe we should check this out.
Yeah.
And Houston was just booming. It was fascinating. And Rice was just an extraordinary place. It was just, it was twice the size of Haverford, half the size of Princeton. It was half the cost of Princeton and had twice as many people on scholarship than Princeton did. It was a beautiful place of where you really, if you could get into Rice, you could.
How many years have you been teaching at Rice now?
So I came in 1972.
Oh wow! Okay. So how have you witnessed the changes in the student population there, just in terms of the diversity, and then also how the students interact? And I'm really curious about what you're seeing on campus, over these last 2 to 3 years, with all the contentious divisions and things that are going on.
Yeah, there's less of those divisions at Rice for some reason. I think partly we have the college system, so there was a random sample of the students are sort of assigned to each of these different colleges, 11 different colleges, and that then is a real community within of what's still a small community of 4,000 students. But when I first came to Rice was about 80% Anglo, 75% Texan, right? And now it's 40% Anglo. It is a tremendous diversity, and it's a diversity that works because you live in a smaller community and you get to know each other in very effective ways. The 1 week of orientation for freshmen always succeeds, in every kid at the end of that week is, thank goodness I'm in this college and not in all those other colleges. This is sort of bonding that goes on.
Yeah.
But it's been fascinating. And the other thing that's interesting, I think, is that when I first came to Rice, there was some volunteering on the part of students, but it was almost all through religious communities and churches. And now, enormous amount of volunteering, a real understanding on the part of the students at Rice of how privileged they are to have the opportunity for the kind of education that Rice offers, and a recognition that most Americans have very little chance to get that, and a need to give back. And you can see that happening across the board. Houston is one of the most. We have low taxes, but we are more likely to volunteer in Houston than in most other cities, and that's the other great strength of Houston, I think, is that people across the board in the city love it here, believe in the city. People complain in our surveys because we invite them to about traffic, pollution, crime, the hot summers, the no mountains, the flying cockroaches. Well, how would you rate the Houston area as a place to live? It's a wonderful place to live.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
So it's really interesting to see that in the surveys too.
Yeah, it really is. So one of the driving themes of this podcast is trying to help people see themselves in someone that they might consider to be the other. The bottom line is, we're trying to have conversations here that remind us of our common humanity. Based on all of your research and all of your scholarly work through the years, what words can you offer us to help us look past our divisions and our preconceived notions and ideas of people that, for whatever reason we have labeled as the other?
Well, I think about it, American attitudes toward immigration in general. There have been 4 big waves of immigration. The first were the British, then came the Irish and the Germans. I need not remind you what we thought of the Irish when they came, and then came this massive numbers of 15.9 million from Southern and Eastern Europe. They weren't Protestants, they were Catholics and Jews, and they had no history of democracy. They can take our jobs, destroy our country. Tremendous anti-immigrant attitudes, and then dissipating, and now here we are again, as a nation of immigrants. And what is interesting to recognize is that those antagonisms and fears are dissipating as the second generation comes of age. The growth in the numbers of Latinos and Asians and African Americans to some degree in Houston today is no longer new immigrants. It's the 100% American kids who are the children of the immigrants of 25 and 30 years ago. And that changes everything. Will they ever learn English? Will they ever come out of their co-ethnic enclaves? Will they ever become American? And we are, and as the second generation comes of age, 100% American kids, totally at home here, and yet at the same time retaining connections to their countries of origin. and enriching our lives tremendously in ways that are no longer as threatening as we've always thought. Immigrants are, never going to become Americans. They're never going to assimilate. And they always do. And America's great genius is assimilation. So that's another reason for optimism. You can see this fear dissipating, and it's as American as apple pie to be. Every time a new wave has come, we've said, well, the last wave was great for this country. The current wave is destroying America, right? And here we are again. But now this wave has gone on long enough that you can see the tremendous contributions that have been made. Houston, one example is that Houston is now world famous as one of the best places in the world to eat out in. Just wonderful food, wonderful restaurants, wonderful fusion of cultures, and the art scene that is so powerful in Houston is now beginning to reach out in a much more exciting way with the mariachi operas and the new exhibits at the museum that remind us of the richness of the earth and of the world and of all the peoples of the world gathered together now in one remarkable place.
This is why I always love talking to you, because I always feel so much more hopeful, and to have the research back up that feeling
to
of
see
hope
it over time.
Yes, because the context is important. The context is so important because we're being bombarded, every hour of every day with the political divisions and the impeachment and the election and the this and the that and. Is our democracy going to survive? And what I'm hearing from you is that it's really the people that are going to pull us. We're going to be okay.
Well, if we can improve our democracy, and if we can get away from the us versus them kind of
exactly. But you're hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take longer than it should. There's going to be frustrations of various sorts. There's that antagonism that Trump to some important degree is speaking to, that fear of change. Right. And it's a reminder of the failure of the Democratic Party to reach out to folks who are, especially the one group that is suffering the most in America, the one group whose life expectancy is dropping, the one group that is dying rapidly from what economists call the diseases of despair, drug addiction, alcoholism, suicide. It is white men with high school educations or less living in small town or rural areas who are coming of age and discovering my father worked in the coal mines. My grandfather was in the steel mills.
The book,
there are no
Hillbilly
jobs.
Elegy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're saying this is what President Trump
so that combination
really tapped into when he won the election.
We're going to fix the trade system, and the coal mines will come back.
Right.
And at the same time, seeing an America that is seeming to pay less and less attention to poor whites and more attention to blacks and Latinos. And that combination is what creates a lot of that antagonism and fear. And the Democratic Party, if it's going to succeed, has got to reach out effectively to poor whites and say, we can offer, we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to ensure access to quality education. One of the other things that I think is interesting in Houston is an awareness of the importance of preschool. We asked in our survey last year, we're going to ask it again this year, so we'll see if it's changed at all. It said, are you in favor or opposed to increasing local taxes in order to provide universal preschool education for every child in Houston? You start a question with increasing local taxes. You get, whoa. Maybe 50, 55%, 67%. 40% strongly in favor, and only 30% opposed to increasing local taxes for that purpose. And what's interesting there is, of course, that's exactly right. One of the moments of truth in American education is third grade reading. If you're not reading at third grade level in third grade, you are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And the single most powerful predictor whether you can read at third grade level, did you start kindergarten ready to learn to read? And rich kids in Houston start kindergarten 1.5 to 2 years ahead of poor kids. And that gap is the critical place where the brain has been growing by 40%, absorbing whatever are those. It's the one intervention that everybody recognizes pays off tremendously.
Right.
We're not able to do it in Houston. We still have that tremendous inequality.
There is so much to be gleaned from your research. I can't wait for this book to come out. It's called Prophetic City, and it will be out sometime later this spring, right?
Sometime early May, we think.
Early May,
Yeah,
early
never
May.
know.
Okay. Well, Stephen Kleinberg, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective and giving us a lot to think about and giving us some hope, because we need it.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Of course. And thank all of you for taking the time to watch and listen, and for giving Steve permission to speak and having the courage to listen with an open mind. We'll see you next time.